I wasn't supposed to fall for you. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now for today's video, I'm doing another historical romance recommendations video ahead of the HR readathon that I'm hosting with my friends Jessica from Peace Love Books and Lacey from Lacey Book Lovers. If you guys are new to my channel or if you guys never heard of the historical romance readathon before, basically it's a readathon where we read a lot of historical romances for a certain period of time. This is, I think, our 4th time hosting it. I think we held it the first time last year, and then we did another second round in the end of last year, and then we did a 3rd round at the beginning of this year, and now we're on our 4th round. So the readathon is taking place from June 28th all the way to July 4th, and I'm so excited to be hosting it with my friends once again and to really encourage readers to try different things and to try historical romance. Me and my friends love historical romance a lot, and I joke around from time to time that I'm converting my channel into a historical romance booktube channel, and it's not official and it's definitely not the case. But this year I have read a lot more historical romance because of the readathon, and also because a lot of the contemporary novels that I have been picking up from traditionally published authors and also just indie authors weren't really hitting the spot for me. But what I did really like was the historical romances that I did read. So that's why you will tend to see more historical romance videos on my channel. No plans yet. I'm still reading contemporary and I'm still reading like middle grade and young adult novels, but you'll just see more videos on historical romance because it's the only thing I'm reading right now and I'm a mood reader. So for this video, I am going to give you some recommendations for one of my favorite tropes, which is like kind of like a matchmaking trope and a romance where the two characters weren't supposed to fall for each other. Like maybe they had intentions of falling in love with someone else and then somehow stumbled upon finding love with someone else instead, which is our hero or a heroine. And it's definitely something like a treat for me because you start off the book and you already know that these two people are clueless and they don't know what's going to happen in the end, but us as readers definitely know because it's a romance story and romances tend to have happily ever afters with our two main characters. It's so cute and fluffy when we see these two characters kind of like realize that, you know, they were perfect for each other all along, and that the crush that they had or the person that they had their goal set towards of marrying is not the person that they're going to be marrying in the end, and it may not be their perfect match. So let's get started with some recommendations for this trope. So the first recommendation that I have for you is actually a book that I recommended in my best historical romances so far in year 2021. And if you haven't watched that video yet, definitely go check it out. But this book is Lady Be Reckless by Megan Frampton. And basically it follows the story of our heroine who decides to kind of want to marry the Duke because her older sister didn't want to marry the Duke in book number 1. And she is the main character in book number 2. So she sets her eyes out for the Duke, but the Duke actually doesn't really want to marry her because he doesn't feel a connection. He doesn't want to marry her for whatever reason, but he kind of strays her along and tells her that, you know, if you kind of help my best friend find a girlfriend or find a betrothed, a fiance or whatever, then, you know, maybe I might like you. So she kind of has this delusional like idea in her head that the Duke will fall in love with her as long as she sets out this goal and completes this goal. So she spends majority of the time with his best friend and they kind of develop a friendship with each other while she's trying to find suitable women that he could marry, and then they learn more about each other, and of course they fall in love with each other by accident. And it's definitely kind of like a matchmaking story once again, and it's definitely one of those stories where they didn't realize that they would fall in love with each other, but they ended up doing it in the end. So the next book that I want to recommend that follows this specific trope or this story idea is When the Duke Was Wicked by Lorraine Heath. And if you guys are new to my channel, I love Lorraine Heath. Lorraine Heath is definitely one of my favorite historical romance authors out there. This one is certainly one of the many treats that Lorraine has written in the past. So this one follows a main female heroine who has a lot of money, and she is wealthy beyond imaginable, and a lot of the suitors that are coming towards her want her wealth, and not really for herself, but she wants someone who is compatible to her, who understands her, and who ultimately she can fall in love with. So what happens is that she asks her best friend to help her sort out the duds in the group and the people that are just fortune hunters. And our main hero comes from a darker background than you would imagine in historical romances. He has a past that is not really squeaky clean. He had a wife, but his wife died, and now he is dealing with this grief and sorrow over his wife, and he doesn't feel like he can marry again or fall in love again. So he decides to help our heroine and help her find a suitable husband, because at least one of them can be happy. But what he realizes very quickly on is that a lot of the men might not be suitable for her and would not be good enough for her. And this is kind of their romance, where they fall in love when he's supposed to be helping her find someone else to fall in love with. So the next recommendation that I have for you is Lady Clare is All That by Maya Rudell. And now Maya is an author that I believe I read more of last year, at the end of last year, and then I read more of her in the beginning of this year. Maya is definitely an author that I quite enjoy a lot, and I would recommend you to check out her books if you do see it on shelves in your bookstores or just shelves in your library. So this one is definitely a more interesting one, where our main heroine actually has an eccentric job. So I feel like a lot of historical romances feature heroines who don't really work much, or who have a lot of money and they can stay at home and their main goal is marrying, and those are the historical romances that you'll see in the 1980s. But now in the early 2000s and also in the later 2010s and 2020s, you'll see more heroines with actual like careers and jobs and like brains. So this one is Lady Clare, and Lady Clare is our heroine. She is a mathematician, or she's really brilliant at math and sciences. She's really book smart, and what she wants is that she wants to marry someone who is equally smart as her and who she can carry a very thoughtful and intelligent conversation with. So she has her eyes set on this really like great, astounding mathematician, and what happens is that she ends up getting closer to the opposite of that, which is our hero. Our hero doesn't really know what math is. Like, he understands math, but he's definitely not at Lady Clare's level. He's a fighter. He's more definitely like a bronze rather than a brains type of person. But not to say that he's dumb. I'm just saying that he's more street smart versus book smart. And this is kind of like an opposites attract romance, where these two complete opposites actually find love together. And it's just so cute, and it was so endearing to watch these two characters fall in love. And it was kind of like one of the very first romances that I did read where our heroine was like really intelligent and falls in love with a man that wasn't as intelligent as her. I also really like this book because our hero was actually so supportive of her, and it was so cute to watch, because as a woman back in that day and having that sort of intelligence, a lot of men didn't really believe her and discredited her a lot for her research and for her brains. And so when he kind of stood up for her in multiple stances and in multiple situations, it was definitely really cute. And I forgot to also mention one of the main reasons why they were even in the same realm of knowing each other is because what happens is that someone bets that they can't date Lady Clare, and then he bets that he could. So he's doing this all for a bet at first, and he doesn't suspect that he'll fall in love at all, but obviously he ends up falling in love. So for these recommendation videos, I actually didn't have enough books that I have read in the past to talk about, so I decided to pick up a few books that were recommended to me from Goodreads and also from a quick Google search. So I did put in quite amount of effort to finish these videos, but hopefully you'll enjoy these recommendations in the end. But this one I did pick up fairly recently. It's from Vivian Lorette, and I think I have read maybe one book of hers last year, and I just never got around to reading any of her backlisted titles. But this one is called How to Forget a Duke, and it's basically book number 1 in her series where it's about matchmakers. And our heroine, she is kind of on the older side. She accepts that she's going to be a spinster sister, she doesn't really think that she's gonna fall in love. Plus, she's really busy with managing her matchmaking business. And a lot of people in the society actually don't believe that her profession is a real profession, but she really believes in herself and she really wants to drive business and to make a company for herself. So when a duke approaches her and kind of gives her an incentive of publicity, she can find him a suitable wife, she's all ears for it because she really wants this duke to find love, and then everybody else will kind of believe in her skill set. But what actually ends up happening is that our heroine actually runs into a bit of trouble where she gets into an accident and she doesn't know how, but she washes up ashore near the beach and basically she lost all her memory. And the only person that she can attach herself to is the Duke. And then with doctor's orders, she has to stay in the Duke's home because if she doesn't, then it'll stop her recovery process and she will suffer like a greater deal of amnesia. So this is definitely an amnesia trope is inside as well, and it's enemies to lovers as well too in the beginning because our Duke actually doesn't believe in our heroine's like skill set at all, and it was a fun story and I kind of really enjoyed it too as well. So the next recommendation is definitely another matchmaking trope. This one is called How to Marry a Duke by Vicky Drilling, and basically this one is a read that I picked up because I bought a lot on eBay and then it was Vicky's books and it's really pretty, so I wanted to read it. So this one was a really fun historical romance featuring something like of The Bachelorette, but The Bachelor. Basically what happens is that our hero wants to find a wife, and so he approaches the city's like matchmaker, and then the matchmaker is our heroine. So our heroine is described to be in her later 20s and she's described to be a plumper person. She's more curvaceous. What happens is that our Duke challenges her and asks her for her help to find a wife so that his meddling mother and everybody else would just like settle down. He needs to also have an heir for his title as well. So what our heroine ends up doing is that she ends up selecting like around 20 girls and then puts him through kind of like a speed dating process, like a speed courting process where everybody kind of has like 5 minutes to introduce each other, and then afterwards he decides in the end who should stay and who should not, and it's like round by round basis through chapters and chapters and chapters. So you'll get to learn a wide range of different girls in the pool of girls, and then I suspect, since I never read book 2 or book 3 yet, that some of the main girls that were mentioned a lot in the first book will have their own individual love story in book number 2 and book number 3. What ends up happening, obviously, is that our hero ends up closer with our heroine. They develop a enemies to lovers romance, but then it quickly turns to friends to lovers. They get to know each other a lot more. They're able to talk to each other about their vulnerabilities, and they also get to talk to each other about the things that they want to look for in a wife or a potential spouse. And this is where they kind of come to a mutual agreement on a lot of things. I found this one to be a very fun and interesting concept because I don't see stories like this much in historical romance, so I feel like you guys will really enjoy this one. Now, the next book that I want to recommend is definitely one that I actually haven't read yet, and I was going to read for this video, but I decided to kind of cut it off short and I'm not going to read it yet. But this one I think is going to be really fun. It follows the same trope of the matchmaker falls in love with her client. This one's called When the Marquee Met His Match, and it's by Laura Lee Gerkel. Now, Laura Lee is an author that I've read in the past. I only read one of her stories. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my favorite. So I don't know if this one's going to be my favorite. So take this recommendation with a grain of salt, or if you read it already, let us know in the comments down below if this one's a good one. But this one follows the story of our hero, who is kind of a scoundrel, and he is a playboy. He goes around town flaunting his money, flaunting his title, flaunting his name. But what actually happens is that his family cuts him off and tells him that, hey, you gotta go do your own thing, find money elsewise. So he decides that he needs to marry someone very quickly and get their money. So then he meets the matchmaker, which is our heroine, and asks her for help to find a suitable wife. What happens is that our heroine does not want to help him because of all his bad qualities, and our heroine actually comes from sort of a darker past too as well. She is a recent widow, and now she is focusing all her attentions on helping girls find suitable matches and for girls to find men that they can possibly fall in love with. So it does sound like this hero and heroine has an enemies to lovers romance. So it does sound really fun, and I can't wait to read it soon and maybe possibly read it for the historical romance readathon. So the next recommendation, and also the last recommendation that I have for you, is a book that I also haven't read before, but it's also a new release that's coming out in the later half of this year. This one is also from Megan Frampton, and this one is called Gentleman Seeks Bride. And basically what happens is that our hero follows the kind of like the same story as Laura Lee's book, where he's cut off of all funds and he needs to marry someone very quickly in order to sustain his life. What happens is that he meets our heroine, who is kind of left with her life in a lot of scandals, and she doesn't really mind anymore because her reputation's already ruined. So what's one more scandal? They decide to strike a match with each other. So she would help him find a wife, and then he would teach her how to be a very carefree lady and to not care about what society has opinions of her. And this book definitely sounds a lot similar to Laura Lee's book, as well as a mixture of the other book by Sarah MacLean called 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake. So if you guys enjoyed this one, and if you guys also liked Laura Lee's idea of this book, then maybe you guys will also like Megan Frampton's new release coming out later this year. But anyways, that is it for all the recommendations that I have for you for this one specific trope. Hopefully you added some books to your TBR list for the historical romance readathon, or just for any reading in general. I'll see you guys again next time in a new video. Bye.